So word semantics definitely can come into play. And it's very interesting how one person can mean one thing for one person, and you tell that to somebody else, and they come up with something else, and determine right then and there whether or not you're being truthful. And that cop is then going to go when the cop didn't make any charges against the paternal grandfather to the maternal grandmother. He did for my client. My maternal grandmother went to the magistrate's office to go get a warrant. But when we went in for the criminal trial, the police officer said to the Commonwealth, "I don't think she's telling the truth. She told me she was hit. There's nothing consistent with the hit." The Commonwealth attorney, who's the person who prosecutes the criminal cases, is now already kind of prejudiced and already kind of has a mindset as to where we're going with this. You know, fortunately I'm there to say, wait a minute, I'm here. Let me tell you the story. Let me tell you what happened. Let me tell you the word semantics. Let's fight this. Let's pitch it up there. Let's see what's going to happen. And some days you can get that will work. Some days it won't. Not all people are going to go into a criminal case with their civil attorney behind them because they're not going to have the finances, or their civil attorney's not going to know what they're going to have to do to really help get that criminal case going. When I had talked earlier about teen dating violence, this is something that definitely very much concerns me. I think technology is wonderful. I mean, my husband's dying for the iPhone and can't wait to get it. And my 5-year-old knows how to work an iPhone better than I will ever be able to comprehend how to turn on an iPhone. However, that great technology, Skype, texting, video chats, all of that lend itself to really intimidate, harass, and stalk victims. Telephones have GPS tracking systems on them. A GPS tracking system is very easy to get into place on somebody's car. You don't even need to have a private investigator get it. You can just go over the handy-dandy internet and get yourself a GPS, or you can go into several different stores. I go down to Florida quite a bit, and there is a store called the Spy Store. And in this store, there is more gizmos, gadgets, than you could ever possibly imagine for how to spy on somebody, track somebody, or locate where they are. Even on the internet themselves, it's very easy to track people down. I often tell my clients where there's been stalking and domestic violence, when you go to the grocery store and you want to get that bonus card, don't put down your real information. Do a post office box, have an email account that's just set up for that, because that's an excellent way for people to come in and track you and find you and figure out what you're doing. Your credit card is another amazing trip for somebody to figure out where you're going. And a lot of times people don't realize is that they'll open up a credit card with their domestic partner, spouse, whomever, and that person will have complete and total access to that credit card and can track every single thing that you're doing. So if you're trying to leave the house and you use your credit card because you have no cash with you, all they have to do is make a call to the credit card company and say, tell me the last 10 charges on that card, please. And the credit card company's going to do that. And it's very easy to track them that way. Text messaging. I am just not a fan of text messaging. Not just because the driver's on the road either. I have just seen in so many of my cases where it turns into a harassment issue. It's the first text, because a lot of times, again, when there are children, and even if there's a protective order in place, the judge will say that the parties are to communicate with one another. And they can communicate via text or via email. So what happens? Batterer sends text message. Where are the kids? How come you haven't answered me? And they just start rapid firing. And within the course of 10 minutes, there's 50 text messages going back and forth. And the victim starts getting anxious. Why is he sending me all those texts? Do I have to respond to every single one of them? I'm never going to be able to do anything with all these text messages. How's the court going to look at me if I'm not responding to his inquiries? I'm caught. Like, what do I do? It's a catch-22 for me. If I don't answer him, then I'm not being cooperative. But if I do answer him, I can't even take care of the kids. And because I'm not answering him, now they're starting to get nasty. He's making it, but it's not comments like, you know, inappropriate language. It's nothing like that. But it's subtle words that mean something particular to this woman or this man. To give you an example of what I mean, Judge Rideout, who was a judge down in the Alexandria Juvenile Court for a very long time, he retired. We were doing a training together, and he told of a case that came before him. A woman had asked for a protective order, and the only thing that she could put onto the protective order was, he threatened to do to me what he did last Thanksgiving. When you read that as an attorney, if you're me, the first question is, what happened last Thanksgiving? People who don't really have time, and a lot of time judges don't have time because they have a really big docket and want to move through it. That's not a threat. That's not domestic violence. I'm not entering into a preliminary protective order. She didn't give me enough details. I'm not going into this. But Judge Rideout was one of those very proactive judges. And he goes, ma'am, why are you asking for this protective order? Well, on this Thanksgiving, he told me he'd do to me what he did to me last Thanksgiving. And Judge Rideout said, well, ma'am, can you tell me what happened last Thanksgiving? And she paused. Well, last Thanksgiving I overcooked the turkey. He pushed me up against the wall and held a knife to my throat. So when he told me that this Thanksgiving, I really thought that he was going to do it again. Rideout asked, are you still afraid of him? Yes. Protective order granted. I can tell you there are a lot of judges throughout the entire United States who would have never asked that question because their mindset would have been, my job's not to be your attorney. My job is not to tell you how to put on your case. My job is to hear the evidence before me and make a decision and go from there. But those are the subtle ways that a batterer can just put in words that might not mean anything to any of us here in this room, but to that victim means a whole lot of things. Getting back to the teen dating violence, right now, we're seeing the larger part of victims are coming in between the 15 to 24 year age group. We're also seeing that more victims of forcible sexual abuse are coming in at younger ages. This is also a very difficult age to work with from 15 to 20 because they're less likely to report. Because for a lot of them, especially when they're teenagers, I'm not supposed to be having sex, period. My parents find out about this, they're going to kill me. And I'm being abused. There's a lot of shame in that. And not being able to know where to go and resources. Look at when we did the poll in this room, how many of you, where do you go if something is to happen to you? Where do you get an emergency protective order? We're all older, hopefully a little bit wiser than a typical 15-year-old. And that's very dangerous for that age group and very difficult for that age group. When I started at the beginning, I talked about a couple of very, big ad campaigns. How many of you are familiar with the Red Flag campaign? Red Flag. Yep. One person. Two.
Red Flag.
The Red Flag campaign is an initiative that is making college students aware of dating violence and giving them packets of information that has resources and alerting them to what it is. There are some amazing resources out there. The problem that I see is nobody knows about them, and that's really hard. How many of you in this room know the kids' first license plates? How many of you have seen the kids' first license plates here in Virginia? How many of you know that when you purchase one of those kids' first license plates, that a large portion of that money that's generated goes to funding of domestic violence programs? Again, very much. Kathleen's just Kathleen rocks on with all this information. How many of you know that here in the state of Virginia, you can actually donate your state refund tax return to the Kids First campaign? So those are some things. How many of you here in this room know that Verizon is a large supporter of assisting and helping victims of domestic violence? A couple of more. They put out an amazing video about domestic violence. They help with getting cell phones in the hands of victims of domestic violence. Those are some really big, important things. Liz Claiborne is also another big supporter of domestic violence. But these aren't things that we hear about. One of the things that amazed me in kind of pulling together some research is that kind of throughout the entire United States, 3.3 to 10 million children each year witness domestic violence. Okay, first thought might be, wow, that's really sad. But me in my world. Why should I really be concerned about this? Well, those children who are exposed to domestic violence are more likely to be depressed, suffer with anxiety, or have violence towards their peers. Those children who witness domestic violence are more likely to attempt suicide. Those children are more likely to abuse drugs and alcohol. Those children are more likely to run away, engage in teenage prostitution, or commit sexual assault crimes. So those children witnessing domestic violence can have a direct impact on our lives because we can be a victim of their stuff that they're going through. The other thing that's very interesting to me, that in 2009, out of the homicides that occurred, over 30% of them were due to domestic violence. And out of those domestic violence homicides, 80% of them occurred in the person's home. Now, in 2009, approximately 5,000 victims reported that they were victims of forcible sex, and they were all under the age of 18. That's startling to me. Completely startling to me, and very concerning. One of the things that's also very concerning to me about domestic violence is that we often have this mindset as a society of, it doesn't directly impact me. I need to mind my own business and go about my life. And I have a different approach. I don't think so. I think that this is a problem that really can impact and does impact all of us, especially when domestic violence is happening in a home in your neighborhood, because people can get hurt in the crossfires. A lot of homicides and domestic violence cases are due to a gun. So if there's a gun in that house and there's a homicide going on there and things aren't going so well, guess what? You, somebody that you love, could be caught in a crossfire of something going down in that. What if the police can't get to that home in time? How is that going to spill out onto your side of the street? I had a situation. It's amazing how life happens sometimes. I had a situation, again, I go down to Florida quite a bit, and go down maybe 4 or 5 times a year and visit a friend down there. We stay at their house usually for about a week or so, sometimes longer. And I have a child, and my kid's one of those very active, hi, how are you kids? We're going to get in the neighborhood, we're going to be there. And because we go down so often, you start knowing people in the neighborhood, and you start chit-chatting. There was a family across the street, husband, wife, 2 children. One child was from a previous marriage. The son was roughly 3 years old. Every time we would go down there, the husband was very much, hey, if your child ever wants to borrow anything, bikes, scooters, skateboards, we got them, come on over. Okay. It was kind of like one of those red flag things. You're always offering this. I don't really know you. Okay, great, you're fine and nice. But your kids are never using this stuff. Like, their kids would never be out on the street playing and going down to the playground. Maybe once or twice I'd see them at the playground. And the mom, you try to talk mom to mom and stuff, and there was always this distance and resistance. The dad would always talk, always talk, always talk, always talk. All right, maybe I'm just being a little paranoid, just something's not right here. I can't quite figure it out.